Welcome, brothers and sisters, to another AfterWords where we follow up on the ideas presented in the Shrines of the Black Madonna Sunday service. Today, we are here with Reverend Candia. Good morning, Reverend Candia. How are you?
Good morning, Zadia. I'm doing well. How are you doing?
I am well. I feel well rocked by your sermon, and the drum beat goes on. Can we talk about it for a little while?
Let's do. I appreciate this and look forward to the opportunity of having a conversation with you.
Right on. I'm most excited about the ideas you talked about around hip hop and how hip hop is in its end of celebrating 50 years, a 50-year anniversary. No one expected. I love that you refer to disco having come and gone, and we're thinking that maybe at some point people thought hip hop would end the short life of disco. So that was very surprising. I know disco is dead, but I'm in denial somehow.
Listen, I'm a disco fan myself, so I'm with you. I'm with you.
Hip hop has been a very dynamic force in our society, as you know, and in Black culture. One of the themes of hip hop, the more recent themes, are about trap music and uh, things that are less, I would think, reflective of our creativity. But in your sermon, you talked about you named hip hop as a creative element. Can you talk about the how hip hop has impacted the Black church and
Hmm.
maybe the theology of the Black church with this emphasis on life in real life in real times?
Yeah, Zadia, it's interesting because as you were forming that question, I'm thinking of the multiple directions this can go because hip hop has had a dynamic impact on not just the culture of church, but this world. It's not just America as a society, but the world. And you can see it in fashion trends over the last 35 years. Um, but one of the things that a point I think it's important to make is in reference to our founder Jim Baby Osmond and what he always talked about when it came to the church and remaining relevant.
Mm.
Um, the church is only meaningful if it's going to have an impact on the daily lives of the community and the people. And so when we take a look at hip hop, it often reflects
Mm.
even even if you have questions about his artistry in this moment, it reflects the times.
Nice.
And to the extent that the church remains connected to hip hop, um, it can have a sense of what the next generation is communicating and
Yeah.
how to stay relevant and meaningful, to that new or next generation. I remember when we were growing up, and hip hop was first introduced to the world, right? 50 years ago. As you mentioned, we're celebrating the 50-year anniversary of hip hop. And a cornerstone of hip hop is rap music, and how many people uh, criticized it. It's not art, right?
Mm.
What the heck are they talking about? What are they saying? It was rejected by many corners of society. And what young children were doing in that moment were expressing themselves. And it was a means, it was a way to be heard. And quite frankly, it was a very rudimentary beginning, right? A microphone and two turntables. That's what it started with in the basement where kids were just experimenting. And now we have this genre of music that's a force to be reckoned with. And society must now pay attention to it, as it had to pay attention to it in the moment that it was created. And so, I think in order for the church to continue to be relevant, it has to continue to listen to what our children, our younger generation is saying, because there is, whether we like the message or not, there is a message to be heard, whether we like the creativity or not. we still have to keep our ear to the ground
Hmm.
because folks are saying something in that music, and it might be hard for us to hear. And again, it's always reflective of society.
Right on. I'm remembering as well an immediate example of that relevancy of hip hop is hip hop and BLM, Black Lives Matter, and how
Mhm.
present it was. And I think it was just before BLM started in 2020. Well, it didn't start in 2020, but that's a good marker. And it was Kendrick Lamar who won was it the Nobel Prize for Literature with his
Mhm.
album To Pimp a Butterfly?
Right, right.
Major accomplishment and another milestone in hip hop's evolution. I wanted to check in about how hip hop has been a beacon and a pointer, perhaps, for the Black church. Have we seen it show up in theology in some way, like its concerns?
You know, I think it has. You can see now that you have a genre within gospel music, uh,
Yes,
where now you have hip hop gospel artists, right?
yes,
And it's being incorporated in elements of gospel songs, and so you can have a traditional song that has a rap component to it, just as you have secular music that often has a rap component to it, um, communicating that message to a very different audience.
yes.
And quite frankly, as much as we think it's different, uh, we've had at Shrines of Black Madonna #1 a couple of gospel hip hop artists come through, and bless us with their talents, their creativity. And I looked at the older generation, in the beat, in the rhythm of the poetry has every generation moving within the church.
Ah, ah,
And inspired by the talents that are being manifested. And as I talk about in the sermon, the God-given talents, the sacred talents that are on display, sacred talents that God has put into each and every one of us to offer and share in our communities for the betterment of our communities.
I say, I hear you.
This as we're talking, we're in the sixth day of Kwanzaa season,
Yes.
Kaum,
Kauna.
which is, yes, creativity, but if we were to flush that out, it's bringing that creativity to bear for the betterment of our community. And I will state, and I will argue that hip hop has been the kind of force, when used for good, that has enriched our community.
Excellent. I hear you. And I love God. You don't love God? What's wrong with you? That was my first hip hop gospel song. It's like, oh my God, what's going on here? But
Right,
but
right,
the spirit is there and the message is unmistakable. In
right.
your sermon, you also talk about the drum, specifically the steel drum, and how
Hmm.
it was outlawed at some point, the drum itself, never mind the steel drum, which came much later, by our enslavers. Can you talk about the importance of the drum and the beat to the church?
Yeah, so if you take a look at the root of all religion or spirituality, it has its root in African traditions, right? And the drum was always front and center in our worship service from the beginning of time, and the introduction of the drum in and of itself. Um, it served, yes, as an inspiration in music, but it also served as an artifact in that it
Oh,
was a means for communication, right?
yeah.
And so the use of the drum conveyed certain messages, whether it was to our faith or just simply communicating, just as you and I are talking today. And as you mentioned, when our ancestors were enslaved throughout the world, um, the drum in certain parts of this world was banned because the enslavers were afraid of us communicating with each other and making plans to for our sovereignty, for our freedom. And so it was outlawed, but as I mentioned in the sermon, in a small Caribbean country, Trinidad and Tobago, as a form of rebellion, they created a drum for themselves called the steel drum or the steel pan, where which was very rudimentary at the time, but is now, to me, a sophisticated marvel of an instrument that you can take an oil barrel, and fashion it into a drum that takes on many pitches and tones, and create such a beautiful melody for the world to enjoy.
Yes.
And serves as a symbol of all of Caribbean islands for music, right? I mean, that's probably the one instrument when you think about Caribbean music, that sort of sticks out as a symbol. But it serves as a symbol not only of their creativity, but their perseverance, their 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 desire for sovereignty and freedom, and self-expression and self-determination.
And creativity, which is the
Creativity,
context in which you introduced
absolutely.
it. You
Absolutely.
also introduced, well, for me, it was an introduction. I did not understand what a tabernacle was. A movable, I would say shrine, but you called it something else, a movable,
Yeah, it's the portable tabernacle
portable tabernacle.
right. So we're talking about the journey, right? So our sermon is comes from the book of Exodus. Um, And so, Exodus speaks to the journey of the African nation Israel, uh, 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 while in the wilderness, and heading toward the promised land. And so, yes, God instructed um, the African nation Israel to build a tabernacle, and that tabernacle is a sort of a mobile tabernacle, right? So that they would have a place, one to worship on the Sabbath, because that was an emphasis of that chapter 35. Have a place of worship, but within there, create, um, put together these carvings that would serve as um, a reminder of the covenant relationship that the African nation had with God, and so their sense of responsibility, to God, pursuant to the covenant relationship. I will be your God, and you will be my people. And so the carvings, and all the artistries, and I call it artifact, were representative of that relationship, on that journey, which we know was a very difficult period in the times of our ancestors. And so, I thought it was important to highlight that it was mobile, but also inspired by God. But then the artistry that went into it
Yes.
was sacred. The creativity that went into the creation of it was sacred, because the temple is usually a static place, right? It sits in a place. So it had to, they had to bring architecture. They had to bring the craftsmanship, to bear, and as an expression of their inner divinity, and commitment to our God.
I say, well done. So we checked in on hip hop. We talked about the drum and the tabernacle. Is there another idea you would like to highlight as we close our talk today?
Yeah, and I think if there is an important point to make here is that the story for me serves as an inspiration for what we should be doing today. And we have all of the resources and all the creativity and all the skill sets and all the ingenuity we
Mm,
need
mm.
for our liberation. We
Ashe.
we don't need to look outside of ourselves for that. We don't need to look for permission from anybody else in pursuit of our liberation. We don't need for to read anybody's periodicals to define who we are. We have the ability to define ourselves. We have the ability for self-determination. We have the ability within our community to do all that we need to do to reach you know, our own promised land as a people. And as descendants of the lost African nation Israel, we have in the book of Exodus a clear roadmap and an example of what we need to do to get there.
Ashe. Thank you so much, Reverend Candia, for this morning's discussion. Please, everyone, like and share this message, this discussion, and listen again, watch again the sermon presentation by Reverend Candia as a part of the Pan-African Orthodox Christian Church. Thank you, and
Thank you.
Habari Gani. Peace.
Peace be to you as well.